Hey guys, in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about Proxmox containers and even go so far as to set up a base Proxmox container for faster deployment of future containers in the future. But first, a quick message from today's video sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Linode, the largest independent cloud computing provider. If you don't want to, or can't for whatever reason, self-host applications the way we talk about on this channel, Linode provides virtual servers that make it easy and affordable for you to host anything in the cloud. You can set up any of the applications that they have available in their marketplace with just a few clicks, or you can set up your own Docker VPS and install basically whatever you'd like in a Docker container. They have load balancers and firewalls available to help keep your apps online and safe. If you run into any trouble getting set up, Linode comes with amazing 24/7 customer support by phone or ticket, along with hundreds of guides and tutorials to help you get started. Sign up today at linode.com/dbtech and get a $100 60-day credit on your new Linode account. Links are in the description. So in this video, we're going to be using the Proxmox instance that we set up in our previous video here. And when we're dealing with Proxmox, there's kind of just a couple of basic ways to deploy things in Proxmox. That's either via a virtual machine, which allows us to set up a virtual computer and install an entire operating system on it and deploy it that way. Or if we want a smaller image and be able to deploy things, we can use things called Proxmox Containers. Now, the thing that I like about Proxmox containers is that you can kind of think of them similarly to Docker containers in that it's not an entire operating system that you're installing. You're actually sharing resources like the kernel of the host operating system, Proxmox, with each of your individual containers. And in return, you're actually making your containers that you're setting up smaller and more lightweight. They don't need as many resources to run because they're sharing resources, again, like the kernel, with the host operating system, in this case, Proxmox. So with Proxmox VMs or virtual machines, you could install stuff like OpenMedia Vault or Windows or a Linux desktop or whatever you wanted to install, whereas containers are more purpose-built in most cases. In fact, if we actually take a look, this is my production Proxmox environment. And I currently have 5 containers set up on it. Currently, only 3 of them are running. I've got one for the website dbtech.com. I've got one for dbtech.fans. And then I've got one called PyAlert that I was kind of testing out. So it's just kind of sitting there. It's off, it's not running, but it's still technically there. And then I've also got my template container, and that's what I want to show how to set up in this video. So the reason I like the idea of having a template that I have pre-built for my own needs actually stems back to when I was a website developer. I've mentioned this in the past. I originally kind of got started using Joomla in the 1.0 days, and then in the Joomla 1.5 days, I was still doing that. Further moving on to WordPress later on. And after building websites for a while, I realized that it was more beneficial and more time-saving for me to have a base template to work off of. So I built my own custom Joomla and WordPress themes so that I would have kind of a base foundation that I was familiar with because I built it, I knew the ins and outs of it, and I knew what I could and couldn't do with it. So we can actually do something very, very similar with that, or similar to that rather, with Proxmox containers. So let me show you kind of what I mean by that. So when we come up to the top right-hand corner of the screen, we've got documentation, create VM or virtual machine, or create CT or create container. If I click on create container, our first screen here is just kind of general information, starting with what node do you want this to be on? Because we've only got one node set up, that's all we've got access to, so we'll just click that. Our container ID, some people like to categorize, different types of containers with different numbers. Basically, maybe you'll have, all of your just little one-off Linux containers set up with a 100, or maybe you've got more complex stuff like maybe you've built a container for Nextcloud or something like that. And you want to set that aside and have a different identifier just for quick reference. You can absolutely change container IDs to fit your needs. They don't need to be anything special. Just put in a number there that means something to you, whether it's, again, for categorization or just some other number so you'll remember what that is for. So below that, we've got a host name. I'm just going to call this template, just again to keep things simple here. Next, we've got we've got unprivileged container, privileged container. If you want to nest it, check those boxes accordingly. I'm just going to leave these both checked because that's just how I need this to run right now. Our resource pool, there's nothing in there, so it's not, I mean, there's nothing there. Password, this is going to be your root password. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. And then I'll enter it again in the public, or the confirm password line there. And then if you wanted to upload a public key, an SSH key, you could do that for authentication. I'm not going to, but you absolutely could with the next little section here. Next, we've got this template icon, or you can click next. Either of those will take you to the next screen. So we'll click on template, and we've got an option for which storage option we want to look under. We've just got local for this one. And if we click here, there's no template there. So the first thing we want to do before we actually start building a template is kind of get our base template information. So let's take a look at how to do that. So if we come over here to our local storage right here, we've got some options for ISO images or container templates. If we click on ISO images, we can either upload an image or download an image from a URL directly to the server. Either of those is how you would upload an image to your server for an ISO image. However, again, we want to use container templates, so we can either upload, again, from our local system, we can download from a specific URL, or we can use a pre-built template here. And we've got a few different options. The first two are Proxmox mail gateways, and then we've got Alpine, CentOS, Arch Linux, Alpine, CentOS, Debian. You can kind of get an idea. There's a lot of different things going on in here. In fact, when we get down here to the turnkey section, we've actually got pre-built basically like pre-built containers already set up and ready to go for us. We could do a Typo3 or a Canvas LMS, a DocuWiki, a domain controller, Moodle, Bugzilla, Laravel. Again, lots and lots of pre-built things that you can just set up. In fact, I even believe there's Nextcloud in here, there's WordPress in here, a Joomla, OwnCloud, lots of different options that you can just deploy quickly that is pre-built. And that's fine. I'm not going to do that in this video. We may take a look at that in a future video. Of course, if there's a specific turnkey core image here that you'd like me to take a look at, let me know in the comment section down below, and we can make a video about some of those different pre-built containers and kind of how they work. So coming back to this, we've got a couple of options here. We could just take a base image, whether it's Alpine or Debian or whatever, and deploy a new container that way. I actually like to look for a turnkey core image. Oops, that's not what I want. Type in core there. So we've got turnkey core version 16.1-1, and we've got a turnkey ASP.NET core image. I want to just use the basic turnkey core image. In the past, I've also used Debian 10 and 11. Either of those are fine. It's just kind of depending on what it is you're trying to deploy. Pick the right image for your setup. I, again, like to use turnkey core because it's very, very lightweight. So we're going to go ahead and click on download right here. And then it's going to go through this process, and at the bottom, when it's ready, it will say task OK. So we'll wait for that to come up. Okay, so it calculated the checksum, it verified it, everything there is good, task OK. So we're going to go ahead and close this. And then what we'll do is we'll come back to up here to the top and click on create container again. Again, I'm going to call this template, and I'll enter my username and password, or my password twice rather, because our username in this case will be root. So once we've got that, we can click on template, and then we can come over here and select our Debian 10 turnkey core 16.1-1 that's still compressed. We can see our size here. It's 206.79 megabytes. So we're going to go ahead and select that and click next. So here we've got the option for disks. So the way I do things for a template like this, I just leave this as either 8 or 16 gigs. You can change this later if you need to. Let's just make this 16 gigs just so that we've got a little extra space. And if we needed to, we could add additional points of storage, and we could just put that in like that. Again, we could adjust this. We're not going to do the additional storage for this, but this is just showing how you could have additional drives available to your container if you needed it. So we're just going to go ahead and delete that. We're going to have just 16 gigs of storage for our operating system here. Next, we'll choose CPU. Again, you can click CPU or next. Either of those will take you to the same place. I'm going to give it 2 cores. Depending on what you're trying to deploy, you may want to switch that to 1 or 2, depending, again, what your needs are for that particular thing. If we go to memory, we can select how much memory we want each of our containers to have. If we actually, let me take a look at this. I want to show something here. So if we take a look, this is my live production server where I've got dbtech.com and dbtech.fans, and as well as an Nginx proxy manager container that I needed for different projects. So let's open that one first. Here we can see that I've allocated 512 megabytes to this container, as well as 512 gigs, or 12 megs of storage or swap. And then my boot size, ridiculous. I gave it 62 gigs. I didn't need to do that. So here we can see that I'm using 211 megs of my 512 megs of RAM. I'm using 3.5 megs of my swap space and less than 3 gigs of my actual hard drive space for this container. So this just kind of gives an idea of what an Nginx proxy manager container might look like as far as resource usage is concerned. But if we were to come over here to like dbtech.com, this is running on Bookstack. And again, I've given it 512 megs of RAM and swap, and again, 62 gigs of storage. If we take a look, again, I'm using 273 megs of RAM, 39 megs of swap, and 3.25 gigs of hard drive space. Now, of course, because Ghost is a content management system that I'll be uploading pictures and other media to, having 62 gigs here isn't necessarily a bad thing, because again, this will continue to grow as I upload more content to this system. So giving this one that much space really isn't a big deal, because I was kind of thinking ahead as far as what I was going to be putting on this particular container. If we take a look at dbtech.fans, this one, again, I gave this one 1 gig of RAM because if we look, we're actually using 619 megs, 620 megs of RAM here. So I knew the 512 wouldn't work, so I just doubled that and made sure I had plenty of overhead in case anything happened and I needed more. So below that, I'm using less than 3 megs of swap. And again, this is a content management system where I'll be uploading different forms of media. So again, yes, I gave this one, 62 gigs of storage, and I'm already using about 3.5 to 4 gigs of that. So, so when you're creating containers, think about what that container is going to be and allocate the resources for that container appropriately, so that you don't oversell or undersell what you're going to need for that setup. So if we come back over here to the container that we're building, I'm just going to leave this at 512 megs. Again, this is going to be a template. Before we deploy it, we can adjust values, and I'll show you that here in just a moment as well. For our network, that's going to be next. We can decide what we want our network device name to be. So we're just going to leave this as ETH0. That's pretty standard. We can set a MAC address. We can change our mode. Well, just bridge mode is VBMR0, that's fine. VLAN tag, if we were setting up VLANs, you could put that here. We could rate limit the throughput for upload and download speeds. We can set our IP address. Oh, we've also got a firewall option there as well. We've got an IPv4 static or DHCP address. That's completely up to you. What I like to do, it's a little weird, but what I like to do is deploy via DHCP, figure out what it's going to pull from the network, and then change it to static and adjust it later. That way I'm not trying to have to remember all of the different devices on my network and find an IP address appropriate for this. I let the network figure it out and then adjust it in my system here later. That's completely up to you how you want to handle that. If you do this as static, though, you will want to enter an IPv4 gateway address. Again, I'm going to change this to DHCP, and that'll just get rid of that. Again, IPv6, you can set that up if you want to. I'm just going to leave it as it is here. For DNS, I like to set up a couple of different DNS hosts from different providers, just in case one of them goes down. I'll still have good DNS. And so then we can, oops, I got to put in that last 8 there, and then we can click next. Then it's like, hey, this is what everything is going to look like. Are you sure this is what you want to do? If you're good with that, then you've got a couple more options. You can say, do I want to start this after it's created? Yes or no, by checking the box. And then once we're happy with everything, we can click on finished. So it's going to go ahead and extract everything here. And here in just a moment, we'll be up and running. And again, it says task okay right there, which tells us that this process has been completed, so we can close this window. If you'd like to get early access to my content, you can head over to Patreon, become a channel member here on YouTube, or head over to dbtech.fans, and any of those ways will help support the channel and give you early access to ad-free content. And here we can see we've got a little green triangle, little play button right there. So we'll click that. We'll click on console right here. So it's going through its kind of first boot up process. And now it says template login. So now we can log into our instance here. So what we'll do is type in root, and then the password that we entered when we built this template. And now we're logged in. So because we're using a turnkey core image for this, it's going to ask us some questions. I'm just going to skip the hub services here. System notifications and critical security alerts. Who should get that email? I'm going to put in my email address. Now, this won't always be the case. If you were to do something just like Debian 10 or Debian 11, you wouldn't get this. But because this is turnkey core, they do have this kind of setup process. So we'll go ahead and say enable. Is this email address correct? Yep. So security updates, do you want to do this? It says you will need to be online. I'm going to go ahead and install security updates. So we'll just go ahead and click install. Now we are using a Debian version 10 for the underlying OS of Turnkey Core here, so there will be some updates. In fact, quite a few more than it would be if we were using a Debian 11 base for the Turnkey Core, but that's not where this is. This is still on version 10, so it'll have some updates to run. Okay, so now we are good to go, and we've got our appliance services screen here. We can see the web shell address, the web bin address, as well as the SSH/SFTP address here. And that's basically it. Now we are good to go. So what we're going to do is click advanced menu, and then we're going to go down here to quit, and we're going to say yes. And basically that's just going to take us back to our terminal screen here, so we can, there we go. Now we can just clear that screen. And now we can get to work on actually setting up the services that we want to run in our template. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that I like to use Docker for a lot of things. I like to containerize things just for easier management, that sort of thing. So that's what we want to get set up in this container, or in this template, container template, if I can get my words right here. So what we're going to do is actually get Docker and Docker Compose installed on our template here, so that when we want to deploy another Docker template later on, we can just duplicate this and be ready to go in just a matter of moments, rather than spending all of the time to go through all of the steps here to get Docker installed. I know this isn't a lot, but it's tedious, and I prefer to just be able to duplicate quickly and move on and get my stuff done as quickly and efficiently as possible. So what we're going to do is come back over here, and we're going to just run some commands here. The first one will be, we're going to do apt update, like so. This is just going to update our apt repository. So it says that there are 35 packages that can be upgraded. So let's just go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, so that says it is now done. That's good. Let's clear our screen. Let's clear our screen again. So what we're going to do is install a few things here. We're going to install CA certificates, curl, new PG, an LSB release. So we'll hit enter. And here we can see that everything is up and running. Everything there is good to go. So the next thing we're going to do is actually download the Docker keyring here for this. So we're going to go ahead and enter there. That's good to go. And then we just want to make sure that that is in the right place. So we're going to go ahead and run this command, like so. And then we're going to do apt update again. Okay, all of that's good to go. So the next thing we're going to do is make sure that we've got Docker CE, Docker CE CLI, containered, and the Docker Compose plugin. We're going to go ahead and get all of that installed. Okay, so now it says that that is all done. So again, we'll clear our screen. We'll do Docker PS. And here we go. Now we can see that Docker is running. So we'll do Docker Compose-V. Oops, I forgot. This is a new version of Docker Compose. Oh, there we go. Version, like that. Here we are. We're on Docker Compose version 2.5.0. So that's basically all the further we're going to go in this video, because that's the gist of creating a container. So basically what we did was we went in here and we set up the parameters for the new container. We dictated which base OS it was going to use. We set up all of the RAM and the CPU and all of that sort of thing. We configured it. We then did all of its updates, all of its upgrades, and we installed Docker and Docker Docker Compose and all of the stuff that we need for Docker to run. So the next thing we actually want to do here is basically do a shutdown now and hit enter. So now it's going to go and basically safely shut down the system. And then over here on the left-hand side, once that goes away, we're good to go. So moving forward, if we ever want to quickly deploy a new container this way, what we can do is right-click it, click clone. And again, here we are. We can set our target node, our container ID, our host name. We're going to say template demo. Our resource pool, we're not going to do anything with. And then we can decide where we want our target storage to be. I'm going to say storage there. And I'm going to click clone. So we're going to give this a moment to do what it needs to do here. So once this is done, we can click on our new container here, go to resources, and then we can go to like memory, for instance, and click edit. And we can say, you know what, I want a gig of memory there. And our swap at 512 is fine. We can come over here to our root disk and click edit. Oops, nope, I lied. We can't click edit. We're going to close that. What we can do though is click on Resize Disk, and then we can say how much bigger do we want it to be. So let's make it a total of 32 gigs. So we're going to the size increment. We'll click on Resize, and here we can see task OK. And then right here we can see that now it is 32 gigs instead of 16. You can move the volume if you want to do that. And then basically once we're happy with all of this, we can come over here, right click on start. Then we can click on console. We'll give this a moment. And just that quickly, we're up and running. So check this out. We're going to log in as root. So we type in Docker Compose version here and hit enter. There we go. Now we've got Docker Compose version 2.5, which means that it actually took the previous instance that we had set up earlier with all of its updates and upgrades and the Docker Compose stuff that we installed and the Docker stuff in general that we installed, and just duplicated it, redeployed it. And now we're up and ready to go to deploy whatever Docker stuff we want to deploy in this container. And it's not just Docker that you can do this with, but that's what we use a lot on this channel. So I wanted to give an example of how we could quickly deploy a new Docker server, basically in a virtual or in a container on Proxmox here. Of course, you could set up multiple different templates if you wanted to. You might add additional things to your template, like whether it's Watchtower or Pertainer or whatever it is that you're going to want to use on your upcoming containers that you might deploy. Now, the caveat to that is if I were to go back to template 100 and add Portainer to that, that will not go back and retroactively add that to our template demo number 101. It has already duplicated it. It's not going to continue to reduplicate anytime you add to the originals. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So if you add something to your template, it won't automatically update all of the containers that you built from that template. I hope that makes sense. But that's kind of the quick gist on how I like to use Proxmox containers and templates within containers to quickly deploy new containers using the template that I already built. So hopefully you found this video informative, helpful, whatever. If you did, do me a favor, give the video a thumbs up. That would really help me out quite a bit. I will have links to everything in the description down below. Of course, there are other things in the description down below where you can support the channel if you found the video helpful and wanted to do that. There's also now a thank you button under this video. Of course, there's a subscribe button under this video if you'd like to do that. But with all of that said, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for spending a few minutes of it with me, and I will talk to you in the next video. So let's take a look at another way to download container templates. So earlier I showed this process of coming in here, going to templates, and downloading them from this list right here. The other way we can do this is come over to our node here, go to our shell. We can do pvam update. And we can do a pvam available. And this will show basically the exact same thing we saw in the other screen, but this is of course doing it via command line in our shell here. And of course we can then select any of these that we would like. Just for the sake of doing this, let's do a Debian 11 standard here. So I'm just gonna right click on that, click copy. I'm gonna scroll back down. You know what, I'm gonna clear my screen just to make it a little easier. I'm gonna do pvam download. Then you can choose where you'd like to download it to. I'm gonna say local. And then I'm going to paste in the image ID there, or the image name, and I'm going to hit enter. So now it's going through the process of downloading everything that we need here. All right, it calculated our checksum. Everything there looks good. So now if we come back over to our local that we just downloaded this to right here, come over to local right there. Now we have Debian 10 turnkey core that we had originally, as well as now a Debian 11 standard. So that's just an alternate way to download container templates on your system.